Hello everyone, welcome to another video on the channel, welcome to another Gran Turismo 7 opinion piece. Now this one is a little bit different because it's more of a Gran Turismo 7 unpopular opinion piece. Because we're going to talk about this week's daily race C. It's at Trial Mountain, it's in a selection of production road cars, 10 in total, and it's a race that's been carried over from the recent World Tour finals in Barcelona. Now this race appears to have done something rather strange to the Gran Turismo 7 community and also to some of my fellow YouTubers out there, because to say that people are waxing lyrical about how good this race is would be an understatement indeed. But to name some of the things I've seen said about this race is that it's the greatest daily race C this year, the greatest daily race in history, no other daily race quite like it. That last one might be a little bit true, to be fair. But yeah, I just think a lot of people in general have lost their minds over this race a little bit, because in my opinion it's probably the worst daily race C we've ever had in Gran Turismo 7. Now I've chosen my words relatively careful there by saying it's the worst daily race C. I'm not saying it's the worst daily race, but as a daily race C, this race is actually a little bit of a disaster. So sit back while I dissect this race. I'll explain to you why I think that way, and also why we may have to be a little bit careful what we wish for. Now, the concept for the race itself is certainly not a bad one. We've got a selection of production road cars which have been tuned, they've got spoilers, they've got splitters, they seem to possibly have an upgraded gearbox, and they are very good fun to drive. They're on sports medium tyres, there's loads of grip there, but you really feel the understeer, the force feedback's good on them. They're actually kind of like, I wouldn't imagine they're too far off the pace of Group 4 cars. I can't actually remember what sort of lap time a Group 4 car does round this track, but they don't seem like a million miles off what you'd be doing in Group 4. So the cars are very good to drive. I enjoy driving them, and in all honesty, there is fun to be had in this race as well. It's certainly good fun to watch from a spectating point of view, and it can be fun to be part of, but there's a thin line between fun and frustration, and there's a couple of elements to the way this race has been set up that very quickly, in my opinion, this leads to far more frustration than fun. Now, I've always said that the most important thing about a race is not necessarily the car and track combination, it's all down to those all important settings. You can take the best car and track combination in the world and you can make a boring race out of that. You can take the worst car and track combination, you can actually make a relatively interesting race if you get the settings right. This is not a terrible car and track combination, not by any stretch of the imagination. The problem comes with the settings. So let's get into that now. Now there's three things about this race that kind of ruin it. Two of them are relatively minor, one is basically race ruining, game breaking in my opinion. So let's work our way through them. Let's just get the two not so important ones out of the way before we move on to the real crux of the problem. So the first minor issue, and it's probably not really an issue because of the nature of the cars that we're driving, but I'm a strategy guy, you know I like strategy, and I always like to have an option in a race to try and win or improve my result through other than just driving and racing and overtaking. And there's no strategy in this race. Now I don't think it's a major issue. I've always said I don't mind a no-stop race, so let's just get that out of the way. I would prefer to see something that involves maybe some fuel, tyres, pit stops, but we don't have any of that in this one, and as I said, I don't think it's a major issue, and as I said, I don't mind the occasional race that goes down that way. So that is probably the first little thing that makes me think meh, gives it a little bit of a thumbs down, but no big deal, really, no big deal. The second thing is slightly more of an issue for me, and probably for most people as well, and that is the race length. Now the race is only 7 laps long. A lap's about 2:03 on average. The race finishing time for the winner comes in at under 14.5 minutes, and I would imagine most people will be finishing this race sub 15 minutes. Yes, you heard that right folks, it's only a 15-minute race. Given that the race starts every half an hour, when you cross the start finish line to get the checkered flag, you'll have been driving for about 15 minutes before you are actually racing again in this race. 16 to 17 minutes will have passed. So the actual gap between races is longer than the actual race itself. Now this just shouldn't be happening. Race C has traditionally always been around about 20 minutes long. Now there is the occasional one that comes in a little bit shorter, but this just shouldn't happen. It's a fairly, one lap. You do one lap of this track, PD, one little lap, and you go, oh, it's a 2-minute 5 lap. Okay, how do we get that to 20 minutes? Oh, 9 laps. 18-minute race, maybe even 10 laps, just takes over the 20-minute mark. It's not going to matter. You're still going to get into the next race when it becomes available. When I streamed this race the other day, on at least 3 occasions, I didn't even realise I was on the last lap because the race is so short. In fact, on one occasion, as I crossed the start-finish line to finish the race and the game did something, I actually thought my game had frozen or broken. No, it was just where I actually completed the 7th lap, because I'm just so kind of tuned in and used to the race going on that little bit longer and having a kind of sixth sense, if you like, for how long we have been driving up till that point. So yeah, just kind of ruins it for me. I hate sitting around, even though I'm not a big fan of the race. Maybe if, I only had to wait 4 or 5 minutes between them, I might be more inclined to do a few more. But in relative terms, these are 2 minor issues. The big problem is, of course, the slipstream settings for this one. Now, the slipstream settings are on custom. They might as well be called nitrous, because frankly the slipstream is ridiculous and it causes so many issues for this race. And I'll give you a little bit of a sample of the sort of problems it causes on screen, because basically you're arriving at some of these corners 10, 15 mile an hour faster than what you're used to, and everybody's arriving there at 10 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour faster than what you're used to, and braking zones change and nobody wants to yield, and you just get cluster after cluster after cluster, lap after lap, into the big braking zones every single lap. Don't get me wrong, occasionally those situations can be intense, they can be exhilarating, they can be good fun, but I can assure you, when you do the race repeatedly, it just becomes a massive source of frustration. Certainly for me, maybe not for everyone. There is people out there who just like the battle, there's no doubts about that, but as somebody who kind of likes to always think of the big picture of a race, these situations just become massively frustrating over and over and over. There's no way to get away from a car that you're probably faster than, because they can just sit in your slipstream and just follow you the entire thing. I genuinely think you gain about a second down the main straight in the slipstream compared to not being in the slipstream. That also means if you fall behind, for whatever reason, get involved in an instant, there is no way to catch up whatsoever. Your race is over if you get kind of left behind in the first couple of laps. Look at some of these situations. Is this racing? No. Genuinely, the problems that this slipstream creates for this race, the absolute cluster funks that you're constantly involved in. Look at the state of this going down into the hairpin here. Is this... if this happens on the last lap after, once per race, it's a great moment in a race. If this happens lap after lap after lap, it just becomes a clusterfunk. It becomes farcical. Literally, this slipstream turns this race into Forza. It makes an arcade race. Daily Race C is meant to be the most sim-orientated race out of the 3 daily races. It's meant to be a little bit longer. It's meant to have the most realistic settings in terms of tyres and fuel, and you actually have to worry about tyre wear and have to worry about your fuel sometimes. You have to worry about the white line if you make a pit stop. The slipstream has always been pretty strong in Gran Turismo, but with Gran Turismo 7 it was certainly improved over Gran Turismo Sport. I always said, I even did a video back in the GT Sport days where I said that the slipstream was actually probably the biggest problem for bad and dirty driving in Gran Turismo Sport, but that was nothing. The slipstream in GT Sport was nothing compared to this monstrosity that we've got in this week's Daily Race C. And yeah, as I said, I just think combination of those 3 things, not so much the lack of strategy, this probably is better suited to being a no-stop race, but the fact that the race is so short, the fact that we've got this ridiculous slipstream that just creates farcical situation after farcical situation, albeit it can be good fun at times, albeit it's pretty good to watch, but as I said, that fun can very, very quickly turn into frustration as you're just in silly situation, lap after lap, race after race. And those three things combined, well, not so much the lack of strategy, but certainly the shortness of the race, the stupidness of that slipstream, leads us to me to conclude that this is probably the worst daily race C in Gran Turismo 7's history. Now, I know that's an unpopular opinion, I seem to be in the minority for that, but I've outlined my reasons. It didn't even have to be that way, just make it 9 laps and give us the normal slipstream, and I would have been all over this race, especially if they kind of improved the BOP as well, so we could have used some of the other cars. It really is very much a kind of a 2-car race with the BMW M3 and the LFA, but yeah, just those slight alterations to the settings and I would have been all over this race. I think everybody who still thinks that this race is amazing for some silly reason, don't know why, they'd probably still be enjoying this race just as much. But the biggest fear I've got about this is that the way people are kind of praising this race so much, if somebody from PD is actually out there listening, they're going to take that feedback on board. They're going to go, oh well, the way into the hearts of the Gran Turismo community, let's give them a 14-minute race, let's give them a ridiculous slipstream so they can have chaotic moment after chaotic moment, and let's have no strategy whatsoever. If that's what they want, let's give them that, and then all I'm going to say is don't say I didn't warn you when you turned our game into Forza. Thank you very much for watching, folks. I appreciate it. Leave some comments below. Keep it constructive. I don't mind you disagreeing with me. I don't mind you having a go at me. Just keep it friendly, keep it constructive, and we'll have a good chat about this race. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye now.